Welcome, everyone, to this Lines of Flight seminar. We're going to get started, and before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to say a few words about the Center for Experimental Practices, which is hosting this event. First, I'd like to acknowledge, start with this, that the Center for Experimental Practices is based in Huddersfield in Northern England. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that modern England owes its existence to ongoing extractive and neo-colonial relations around the world. The rights of the people colonized by this country to live and work freely here and to participate in the determination of its future remain unceded. CXP, Center for Experimental Practices, is a small and increasingly precarious research center at the University of Huddersfield. I'm going to drop a link into the chat that would allow you to see some of the activities that we have been up to recently. There's a website there that will take you to various things, including recordings from previous seminar series. We recently completed a seminar series called Whiteness and Sound Studies. Those talks are online. Last year we had Lines of Flight 2023. It was called Black Methods, a wonderful series of talks that you can also access there, and other things going even further back. So please have a look. Thanks to Kate Holden and Colin Frank, who are here co-hosting and helping to organize and manage and curate this series. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. And now I'll introduce our guest for today, Magda Romanska, who I'm really excited to be speaking with. I've been a little bit in touch with Magda for a while, maybe a number of years, I'm not really sure, but I've certainly been aware of your work for longer than that. And I think it's very, very interesting in the current context that we're talking about. This theme of new laboratories always comes back in various ways to relationships between performance, theatricality, liveness, and the digital. And this is something that you have gone very deeply into from the perspective of dramaturgy and through very big variety of digital projects. So just to give a little brief overview from your website, Magda Romanska's research and writing focus on the intersection of art, humanities, and technology, including transmedia storytelling, hybrid and digital dramaturgy, post-human disability studies, and the ethics of mimicry in AI, VR, and post-human enhancements. These are things that are just more and more important, I think, for us to think about across the arts and humanities. Magda is professor of performing arts at Emerson College, also faculty associate at the Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, chair of Transmedia Arts Seminar, also at Harvard, principal researcher at metaLAB, also at Harvard, executive director and editor-in-chief of the Theater Times, research associate of the Minda Gunsberg Center for European Studies, Harvard, research associate at Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, advisory board member at Digital Theater Plus, and a member of the Leonardo Network. All different kinds of configurations of critical understandings from performance, from humanities, from the arts, and the complex digital infrastructures that we all work through, including in this very meeting. So I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really looking forward to learning about some of these projects, and then afterwards we can have a conversation about all these things. Thank you. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm thrilled to be here and to talk to you guys about some of the projects that we do at metaLAB, and also some of the projects that I do outside of metaLAB. So let me share the presentation. Let me see to make sure that I can actually be able to navigate it. All right. So metaLAB at Harvard is we are, as we call ourselves, Idea Foundry Knowledge Design Lab. The basic principle is that metaLAB is trying to work at the juncture between art, humanities, and technology. So we are looking at the ways in which art and technology interacts and intersects in a contemporary world. And there are also different projects that people work on. My area as performing arts, so I'm involved in a couple of projects that do deal with performing arts and technology. So today I want to talk to you about 3 projects that we do at metaLAB and three projects that I do on my own, and they will be a future state manifesto. It was a metaLAB project, the Transmedia Art Seminar, and Digital Access Research Project that are metaLAB projects, and then three of my projects, the Theatre Times, Performap, and our International Online Theatre Festival. So the first project I want to talk to you about is the Future State Manifesto. So during the pandemic, the Future State project, which produced Future State Manifesto, during the pandemic in 2020, we got together a bunch of researchers, theater people, managers, artists, and we met online for a year, monthly meetings. And as a result, we wrote something we call Future State Manifesto. So the assumption of the manifesto was that performance is a human right, and this is based on the UN Charter of Human Rights, which actually states that everybody has a right to access culture. So we started from that assumption, and we also started with the assumption that a pandemic have changed access to art. People, more people have suddenly had access to performing arts. Not just the disabled who were not able to get to the theater before, but economically disadvantaged, geographically distant, elderly, chronically ill, all of the people who have been traditionally neglected by performing arts institutions as potentially not being a potential audience, suddenly became a potential audience due to digitalization of performing arts. And so we've been looking at what this technological revolution in streaming, in hybrid and digital theater making potentially mean. So some of the claims and assumptions of the Future State Manifesto look at the changing architecture of hybrid works. What does it mean to create works which straddle live and digital performance? What kind of dramaturgy will be required? The climate change and whether or not will it affect the touring model, and in general the way that theaters have not paid much attention to carbon footprint, including festivals, and the very definition of liveness. What does it mean to do something live, and whether the standard analog definition is kind of an exclusionary category, or whether we should rethink it. So Manifesto proposed something called Liveness Plus, and it was published in October 2021, and it was translated into a couple of, okay, sorry, I'm not seeing something. It was translated into a couple of languages, into 13 languages, and they're published all over the world, and also exhibited at two different museums. So here are some of the journals that published it. So you can access it in different languages, and we also organized a panel in November following the publication of the manifesto to discuss its main principles. And here are the two museum exhibits that shown some of the principles of the manifesto. So the manifesto was quite, sort of generated more interest than we anticipated it would, and it became a topic of many conversations, and it continues, I believe, making impact on the way that people conceptualize performing arts and liveness and touring model and festival models. Our second project is Transmedia Art Seminar. We are coordinating this with Magda Humanities Center at Harvard, and the idea is that we are going to try to create a series of lectures that define what transmedia is, particularly in theater context. So we're looking at also the different technology formats in relationship to performing arts. And just to give you a sense what transmedia is, we have two definitions, the Henry Jenkins and Robert Bratton definition. Transmedia storytelling represents a process where integral elements of fiction get dispersed systematically across multiple delivery channels for the purpose of creating a unified and coordinated entertainment experience. And then Robert Bratton's definition, transmedia storytelling moves across multiple platforms, preferably allowing audience participation. Each successive platform heightens the audience enjoyment. So it's not adaptation, and it's not multimedia, but rather it spreads a narrative across multiple media. So we've been looking at how this works, transmedia principle works in theater and in other art forms. And this is kind of a broad understanding of what transmedia before the pandemic was. We have for marketing purposes, so advertising, movies or large video games or large art projects through transmedia delivery. We have a franchise model, which typically is, one movie and everybody loves it, and then all of these different projects pop up, which each one representing some aspect of the original universe. And we have an event model which has a horizontal structure and clear ending and clear point of origin. So one event kind of happens and it spreads through multiple media. And then, of course, for educational purposes, this is typically multi-platform and immersive. And for social or political purposes, we need to either advance the cause or persuade or misinform. So all of the conspiracy theories would fall under this, QAnon and others would fall under this social political dissemination of transmediality. And artistic. So this is where we kind of found ourselves in this area of artistic transmedia, so to speak. No particular purpose except to create work of art which is interconnected, typically pre-designed, and which has the same purpose as art. So to say something interesting about human condition. So the transmedia theater before the pandemic was sparse, marginal, and somewhat exotic. So all of these fringe experiments online or in hybrid spaces where, they were, fringe experiments. People were, you had to be quite aware of them to know that they are happening. This changed after the pandemic. As we know, the kind of overflow of various digital content that happened during pandemic pushed the art form, quite a lot in a very short period of time. We began developing new dramaturgies, new hybrid dramaturgies, new transmedia dramaturgies, and new telematic dramaturgies. So why should we study this type of theater that is transmedia, telematic, and hybrid and digital? We want to understand the dramaturgical structure of transmedia performance because it can help us illuminate the model of transmedia in other transmedia landscapes, and the models of transmedia storytelling in other transmedia landscapes. How transmedia narratives are built and disseminated across a variety of live and digital platforms. So QAnon has alternative reality game, for example. Can understanding this type of artworks and this type of dramaturgy help us also understand how content, how information is disseminated across other transmedia environments, and how different live and digital components of transmedia storytelling interact and reinforce the narrative? What are the psychological and structural mechanisms that cohere the narrative for an audience and for participants? So we typically know, how the standard Aristotelian dramaturgy works, and this is how most of the information has been, delivered to the people for much of the 20th century. And today we have this three-dimensional transmedia model in which narratives and information is delivered across multiple mediums. So studying transmedia can potentially help us understand this kind of dramaturgical structure of storytelling. So what's the difference? I already mentioned this, but in a classical dramaturgy, we have exposition, characters' motivation, climactic moments, scene of suffering, reversal, recognition, catharsis, and we have journey from the beginning to the end. So this is a classical Aristotelian dramaturgy that most people who study theater or film, or even if you just watch a classical film or classical theater, you will be familiar with. Now, what is different in transmedia dramaturgy? So the time, space, and action is no longer attached to the same sphere, so to speak. We can all participate at different times, at different places, and we can all be asked to perform different actions. Agency of the audience, so the audience has oftentimes agency. They can participate and control the narrative. So this is in immersive and participatory performances. The audience can explore the environment in a free play model. The level of connectivity between audience members and different storytelling modules. So we have autonomous elements, which every component of the storytelling can exist on its own, or we have codependent, where you have to sort of watch all of them together in order to be able to understand the whole thing together. And finally, the audience point of access, where is the beginning and where is the end? So we have multiple beginnings and multiple endings, and we have to figure out what is the audience's journey is going to be like when we cannot really control how they enter and how they exit the storytelling structure. So our lecture series, just to give you a couple of examples, you're welcome to go and check them out. They are all posted, and we try to tackle those issues from a variety of angles. This year, for example, we had quite a few lectures focused on the concept of liveness and whether the traditional analog definition of liveness is still valid or exclusionary, whether theater definition of theater that is based on the analog definition of liveness is still something that we should cling to. So I encourage everybody to check out this series of lectures. Now, we also track current news and industry developments. We track it on Theater Times. So everything transmedia, theater, we do interviews, reviews, and news stories. You can check them out today on Theater Times. Currently, we have over 200 articles, reviews, and interviews. And so now let me talk about some of my projects. So the three projects I want to mention today is the Theater Times and Performap and our International Online Theater Festival. So the Theater Times is a kind of collective of theater critics and dramaturgs who are coming together to try to give people a better understanding of the world theater. So typical model was that the Western researchers would go and research something, and they would come back and they would publish. This is in sciences, it's called helicopter research. Yeah, you come in and you sort of pick whatever you want from the country of your study, and you return untouched by the actual lives of the people that you studied. And so we we created data times as a way to combat this sort of model of helicopter research in theater. And it's a decentralized model. So our editors, and we have about over 100, almost 150 editors, and they are located in different countries, and they can publish independently on our platform. And we also, have a lot of different areas, and I want to show you some of this. So this is our homepage. And we have a section, regions. So you can kind of search by the region that you want. And we pretty much cover the entire world. And then you can also search by type of theater that you're looking for. So that's another way to search a website. We already published over 5,300 articles, interviews since 2016. So we have quite a big database, and there are some projects emerging out of that database already. There's some digital humanities projects that are looking at, the kind of research, the kind of theater that we cover as a potential source of research and potential source of database for further inquiry into contemporary theater. And now Performap is a small little project that we did. It's interactive digital map, global theater and performing festivals. We currently have documented about over 300 festivals, and you can also search them by listing by festival type, location, and time, month of the year. So we're hoping that people will be able to kind of use this as a way to research the performing arts festival ecosystem for both artists and city planners and urban researchers. So yeah, the Performap, the goal was to be a resource for scholastic, journalistic, and management research on theater and performance festivals worldwide. As scholars specializing in theater performance, but also anthropology, sociology, economics, and urban planning will find that particularly useful. The festivals have a huge impact, huge economic and environmental impact on the places where they take place. And so how they organize, how they fund it, what kind of economic impact, what kind of environmental impact they have, those are important questions. And we're hoping that Performap will help study festivals' impact on local culture and art infrastructure. So finally, our project, the International Online Theatre Festival, so which we started before the pandemic in 2019, and it was a kind of a response to the environmental impact that in-person festivals were having, and on the fact that in-person festivals are quite limited in who can attend them and who can participate in them. So far we had 4 editions of our International Online Theatre Festival, and our model is unfunded. We are kind of trying to develop a proof of concept. So we have everybody who works on the festival is a volunteer, and artists also volunteer to show their shows, typically for a short period of time. The festival runs for about 2 weeks, and artists can choose how long they want to show their shows, whether 2 weeks or just 1 day or 24 hours or a week, whatever works for them. As a proof of concept, we're trying to see, whether something like this is feasible and whether it will get an audience. And we're happy to report that we do get a lot of audience. All of the 4 editions of the festival, this is a video. Play for you guys. for this year. But all 4 editions from showcase like a range of performing arts. And you guys can check it out as well. And all 3 of our projects, the Data Times Performap and our International Online Data Festival, won a couple of awards. We won the Cultural Online Awards 2nd place, and we also won the Heritage Award from LMDA. You can read more about our mission and history on our website. And the experience have taught us a couple of things about the future of digital theater festivals. The pro is you increase both economic and physical access for audiences and theater makers who otherwise might not be able to participate. So it's a more equitable engagement model. And I mentioned this includes people who are geographically distant, unable to travel for mobility issues, family commitments, or financial reasons. So there is a whole group of people who are unable to participate in in-person festivals. And of course, online festivals decrease the carbon footprint and environmental impact, even though, as you know, streaming also does have its own impact. So it's not without any carbon footprint. And increase experimentation by using new transmedia models, performances across multiple platforms, combining pre-recorded live stream and live performances with in an environmental, in a digital environment, which everyone can, with access to the internet, can potentially be part of. And of course, against digital theater festivals, we sacrifice the element of analog liveness and social component. So we do try to also organize panels and discussions and other community building activities. You sacrifice the impact of the community networking on transcultural collaborations. So that's a little bit tricky because we do encourage people to reach out to each other and to create those networks and connections through our digital theater festival. But you can technically argue that in live, in-person festivals that happens more often and in a more organic way, you have sacrificed economic impact on local communities. So that's a big one because local communities oftentimes do derive much of their yearly income from the major festivals which they organize. So the issue of accessibility of in-person international theater festivals, as I already mentioned, we have the exclusion of disabled audiences and disabled artists who can travel easily, the exclusion of older audiences and artists who might not be able to travel. So everybody with family obligations, taking care of children or elders, you might not necessarily be able to just pick up and go to Avignon for 2 weeks. The exclusion of everyone who can't afford international travel. All of this creates a very specific and very exclusionary culture of healthy, well-to-do young people. This applies to both the presenting organizations and audience members. So the culture of the festivals is very specific. It's typically people who are unattached, who are able to travel and who have the means to travel. And so the big question is, how can we potentially disrupt this paradigm and create better access to culture while also impacting the environment? Impact of in-person festivals on environment. And economic impact. So tourism, impact on local economies, hotels, restaurants, hospitality industry, we already mentioned this, travel industry, impact on our institutions, organizations, and employment. And then environmental impact, air and car travel, carbon emission, traffic waste, shortages of water, impact on local ecology. So those are all of the factors that we rarely talk about when we discuss in-person theater festivals. And our digital festival was organized in order to sort of try to create alternative that would provide better access with less environmental impact. Of course, the issue of economic impact on the local culture is one that needs to be also discussed. Potential ideas to consider with performing arts based on our research and our projects, creating new international decentralized organizations and think tanks to conduct science-based interdisciplinary research on theater social, economic, and environmental impact on local communities, social cohesion, child development, and other issues. Developing global comparative research methods focused on the interdisciplinary theater research, example, theater and cognition economics, digital humanities, theater and AI, creating standardized international coding ranking system of accessibility for performing arts institutions to be used and recognized across all countries, developing large-scale global nonprofit educational streaming platforms to increase cross-cultural knowledge and collaboration, and the inclusion of theater in the local educational system. So this is some of the theses that we are currently working on, and our current project. Oh yeah, open theater. I want to this concept of open theater, which has been adopted. It's a theater that encompasses resources, tools, and practices that are free of legal, financial, and technical barriers, and can be fully used, shared, and adapted in digital environment. Open theater maximizes the power of the internet to make theater education, research, and availability accessible and effective. So that's a sort of a concept that we are trying to analyze and research further. And here again are 3 projects, and I want to talk about finally last metaLAB project that we started last year. I'm chairing that project. It's called the Digital Access Research Project, which developed out of our future stage project, but also out of this thinking about accessibility and digital ethics and the relationship between disability laws and copyright laws, and how the two interact or don't interact, which one takes precedence where, how the contracts are written, what are the assumptions that we make about accessibility and availability and audience outreach and all of those things. So, Digital Access Research Project, currently we are working on looking at 4 different regions: the United States, United Kingdom, European Union, and Australia, and looking at how disability laws and copyright laws interact in these different environments, and how accessibility laws work with current technology. For example, to give you an example, the Marrakesh Treaty, which codified the creation of formats for visually impaired, presuppose a certain formats like Braille, for example, or caption, but it does not account for the newly developing formats like live streaming, for example. So looking at what is accessible format and whether the laws of the land actually suggest that theaters and performing arts organizations should incorporate that forms of accessibility in their programming and in their initial contract writing. So this is our current project that is a little complex because it involves um, both disability law and copyright law and theater management and digital ethics and technology, all of those things together. So we're hoping to get it something out this year, some research study that we can share with others. And that's it. So these are all of the projects, and as you can see, all of them pretty much revolve around my interest with digital access and kind of a decentralized theater making and decentralized theater sharing and decentralized research, which the goal is to not just decolonialize discourses, like to say, but also to create new form of discourses that would be transmedial and more collaborative and transnational in their scope. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I invite you to contact me if you have any questions and to visit our website for more information.
Thank you, Magda. Yeah, and I mean, we have time now, so we have been joined by a bunch more people. So there's actually a little group of us here now. I don't know if people have any questions that you'd like to ask. You're welcome to put a question in the chat, or you can also turn on your video and say hello. I have a couple of things that I would love to ask, but I don't have to go first, but I will if no one's raising their hand. Yeah, I mean, so I thought maybe I could ask you to dive a little bit with me into the concept of the laboratory, which is one that I'm so interested in. While you were talking about the future stage, I briefly went over to the manifesto, which is a lot of material that I would like to look at further. But there was one part that I saw, there were different configurations of kind of what transmedia can mean for a theater event. And the first one was something like it becomes a kind of broadcast situation or a production studio drawing on the lineage of laboratory theaters, which you've also written extensively about, well, at least about Cantor. And so I'm wondering, my question has two sides with regard to the laboratory concept. First one is, all of these kind of digital interfaces, the online festivals, the online and also the online theater festivals. Like I maybe I'll ask you this question separately because the other one is a separate question. So the first question is, can you talk about like how this influences the theater company as well as the theater event or the theater artist? You mentioned the pros and the cons, which I think is very useful. And on the con side was like, yeah, there's a loss of a certain impact to the environment, but also, you know, it also clearly changes the life of the theater company in some way. Is it even still a theater company? So, yeah, what have you think about that? Especially if we do look back to like Cantor and Grotowski and those pasts.
Well, I mean, it's a little tricky, yeah, because when we do look back at some of the iconic theater companies, like Grotowski, for example, we are with the knowledge that we have right now about group dynamic and power dynamic, and we are kind of going back and looking at some of those groups, and it's like, wow, that was a little bit creepy what they were doing there, yeah. There is a kind of cultish energy that sometimes happens in those types of labs, in those type of theater companies, yeah, that might have a little bit what we would consider today an ethical power dynamic, particularly in terms of gender, yeah. I mean, a lot of publications came out in recent years about Grotowski's, demands that he placed on his actors. So the ethics of such groups is being questioned right now, and because oftentimes this type kind of tight-knit groups, they live together, they work together, and they are a kind of a commune-like model, yeah. And at the extreme end of it, and so it's a kind of becomes a substitute family, and so is this kind of model still valid in modern world? I'm not sure. Like I feel like maybe we are moving towards more transparent models, which um, do not might not create that kind of level of intimacy that previous ones have created, but also might perhaps not be so prone to that sort of cultish power dynamic, which we have discovered uh, might be part of that kind of family model that have been practiced in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So I mean, I don't know, what would be the good model for theater lab, like the way that Grotowski or Cantor organized, yeah? Like how much connection do you need? How much in-person connection do you need? Like when the connection is created, um, what are you trying to accomplish with that company? Like, is it the lifestyle, or is it in generally in pursuit of certain missions, certain objectives, certain goals? What is the function that the company is fulfilling? Emotional, artistic, intellectual, economic, all of those things. And so I feel like this is something that theater industry have yet to um, fully analyze and think about. Like what would be a good model of a theater company that would be lasting and at the same time intimate enough to create a good work. And we do have those models. I mean, I'm hoping, today theater companies that are trying alternative ways of doing theater or creating companies or interacting. Now, in terms of a lab like ours, we are decentralized and we all have our jobs and our families, and it's a little bit different model. It's a more professionalized model. I would say more institutionalized model, that is attached to other institutions. So that's a little bit different from what we're talking about, like Grotowski's lab, for example, which is not attached to any institutions and not really subject to any institutional rules and regulations and policies and things like that. And so, so there is this range of labs and lab models and big questions about, what do they do and how do they function. Anyways, this is a very long answer to your question.
That's all right. I want to follow up. I have, more things based on that, because I guess my question is about, understanding that kind of, with awareness of that kind of cult dynamics and the potential for ethical abuse and things like that in these kind of very contained situations, then the opening up that a digital situation offers, obviously takes you out of that enclosure into a much larger world. But I think there's a flip side, well, not a flip side, there's a complementary danger or risk that you alluded to in the cons, under the kind of the cons of a digital theater festival, where everything is pulled out of the live encounter and the live situation and the specific place and the specific community, and potentially extracted up into this digital cloud in such a way that it doesn't come down and support again. And particularly, like I noticed when you said that the theater festival is run on volunteer basis, which is of course fine and a very good start, but then you were also talking about potential funding models. So like what I'm wondering is, in these different kinds of digital models, I've been speaking with someone, Alex Boyd, who runs Intercultural Roots, who keeps talking about this metaphor of a tree where there's a regenerative quality where, you have the roots, it goes up through the trunk, it goes out through the branches, but it comes back down and it nourishes again through the roots. So if there is these live processes, there's still, a lot of them, it seems like from the trailer, for example, very theater based. So that's people in a room working together in this close proximity somehow. And that's going up into this digital environment that's being pulled out of that into this much larger circumstance, which is wonderful. How does that circulation come back to support the emplaced situations, the buildings, I guess you said the institutions, the people, because otherwise there's that risk of like the gig economy, right? Like the Uber kind of Uberification, where the cloud replaces any kind of responsibility to the individuals, and then everyone is just alone and abandoned, with no kind of support. So how does the digital, what are the possible models for coming back around?
There is a couple of things that we have discovered, like, we did this because we didn't have any funding, and we wanted to test it and see like what would be the good model to do, and a couple of things. So typical funding organizations, including both private and state, fund a project which promote national cultures. So like, British Council is going to promote things having to do with Shakespeare, and it's almost impossible to find funding for international things. Like French government does not want to promote, I don't know, Madagascar's theater, and so having kind of pushing through more international funding, not just like 2 or 3 partner collaborations, but projects which are truly international, and changing the way that governments and funding organizations think about culture, as culture not just a way to promote your national identity, but as culture as being a way to generate dialogue and a mutual understanding. And for this to happen, you need to fund projects which are truly international in scope. And that is not what we found out, trying to apply for all of this funding that is not there for international projects. Now, the second big thing which emerged in recent years is, of course, the large databases for AI models, and that's something that I think we should push tech companies to recognize that they have 2 choices. They have 3 choices. Okay, they can use a pre-existing content which is in public domain, and when they choose to do this, this is going to be quite outdated content that does not reflect contemporary world, the diversity of the contemporary world. Like if you take a data, open access database of French productions, there is one like that. Those are all great productions, classical productions, but they don't really reflect on contemporary France, and so they can choose to do that, but then their product will become irrelevant, okay? And they can scrap whatever artists are posting without asking the artist for permission, and that's gonna be, huge legal fight for the next, decade, or they can actively engage in archivization and digitalization of cultural products of the moment by paying artists for what they do. And so, so the process of what do you archive, what do you digitalize is also connected to funding, and it's also connected to, the issue of mainstream and the margin, like who has access to the funding, which cultures have access to funds to digitalize and archive their product. And this includes both on the global international level, which countries fund their digitalization and archivization processes, but also within cultures, like what kind of people have access to major theaters, national theaters, which have huge digital departments which are able to record and digitalize their product, and what kind of fringe theaters which might be, run by people who have less privilege, less sense of belonging to the mainstream culture. They're not gonna know how they're gonna digitalize and archive their product. So, AI companies can be in opposition to that, or they can be at the forefront, providing the funding to digitalize and archive, and archive as broad aspects of culture as possible. So this is like three ways of funding. The state and private funders need to realize that the projects they have to be a broader, more international way of thinking about culture that is not necessarily bound to national identities, and three, so the state funders, the private funders, the foundations, and finally the tech companies have to sort of be pushed and reminded that the archive needs to be contemporary for it to be useful for them, and that the artists who create art needs to be paid for that work that they do. And so this kind of a system, rather than being antagonistic, needs to be a collaborative system in which both the artists and the management and the AI companies, the objective is to create as broad and equitable access to archive as possible. So this is sort of my outlook on those things after having done all of these different digital projects. And this is sort of what I have been advocating and advocate artists, the directions in which we should be pushing to try to de-Uberize arts, to make the tech companies and government and funders aware of the issues that are at stake, and to also have them change the way that they think about cultural products.
That's very hopeful. Thank you for that. That idea that the tech companies will support a sort of democratized archivization is very, very hopeful, and helpful. Can I ask you? There's something in the chat. I'll just take a quick look. But can I ask you about metaLAB also? I'm curious about its structure as a lab, or maybe it's not a lab. Maybe it really is a meta lab. But I'm wondering how it works in that sense, because also, putting aside the theater laboratory idea, I'm also really interested in the laboratory as a site of transformation of academic possibilities. And I can see on the metaLAB site all of these sort of digital projects, and I see that it's led by someone coming out of design. And I guess one of my questions is, does metaLAB involve embodied interaction and cooperation? Are there physical spaces that people come together in the conventional sense of a lab? Are there experiments in that sense? Or is it really sort of meta to the idea of a lab? So there might be different kinds of experiments happening, but it's really more of a coordination of labs. What is its structure?
No, I mean, we do have, a project that are space-bound, so to speak, yeah. Quite a lot of them. And people, do a lot of things in the museums and performing spaces and, and stuff like that. My colleague Linz Derry does a lot of space-bound dance projects and museum-bound projects. So we do space attached space-bound projects as well. But I think the idea is that we simply are a group of people who are kind of interested in the latest big questions in our field, and are trying to pursue those questions, whether through different types of experimental environments, so either research or experimental practices or exhibits or art projects or research groups, seminars, things like that. So just if you have a question that you want to pursue, that's a great supportive environment, because it's like, okay, this is the question that my field is struggling with right now. For example, my colleague Sarah Newman is working on AI and pedagogy project. Yeah, so this is a kind of a question of the day. What do teachers do with AI? So Sarah is pursuing that question, and within the context of Berkman and Harvard Law School. And so I think it's a kind of a mix, I would say. It's a hybrid combination of in-person and digital, because one of the nice things about being hybrid is that you can have people collaborating across different spaces and different environments. And we have also a lab branch in Berlin and Basel right now. So we have people there, and people travel between those 3 labs and collaborate on projects as well. So that kind of hybrid model of the lab, I think, is the future, because you can invite and work with and exchange ideas with people across the world, but you can also work locally with your partners who are space bound with you in a particular, time period and geographic location. So that's, I think, a brief answer. Any other questions that we have on the chat, maybe?
No, there's a couple of people just saying, thank you, this was very interesting, but they had to go. Any other questions that anybody wants to ask before we close? Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much for coming and for talking with us. This has been really interesting. Yeah. Oh, Kate, did you want to say something? Or no? Okay. Yeah, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
And thanks
for
everyone who
having
joined.
me. And I invite everyone to check out some of our projects and to come to our lectures and to reach out to me personally if you have any questions or would like to ask about any of our projects that we work on.
Great.